The cargo bay was dark and cold. Captain Park walked between the metal containers with a flashlight in her hand. Something had triggered the motion sensor 3 times in the last hour. She thought it was a rat. Ships always had rats, no matter how clean the crew kept them. The Promise was an old freighter. Had bought it 15 years ago with every credit she had saved. It was not a beautiful ship. The paint was faded. The engines made strange sounds, but it was her home. It carried cargo across the outer rim, through the empty spaces between colonies where law was weak and danger was common. Moved her flashlight across the containers. She saw nothing. She heard nothing, but she felt something. After 15 years in space, she had learned to trust her feelings. She stopped near a container marked with food supplies. The seal was broken. Someone had opened it from inside. Pulled her pistol from her belt. She was not afraid. She had faced pirates, smugglers, and creatures that had no name in human language. But she was careful. Careful people lived longer in the outer rim. She opened the container slowly. The light from her flashlight fell on bags of dried grain and boxes of preserved fruit. Everything looked normal. Then she saw the eyes. 2 golden eyes stared at her from the darkness behind the food. They were large and round, filled with fear. They belonged to a creature no bigger than a human child. Kept her pistol raised. She knew what this was. She had seen pictures in military databases and warning bulletins. This was a They were the most dangerous predators in known space. Adults stood 7 feet tall. They had black scales harder than steel, claws that could cut through ship hulls, and teeth designed for tearing flesh. They were fast, strong, and smart. Most species avoided their territory completely. Those who entered rarely returned. But this was not an adult. This was a cub. Its scales were soft and green, not yet hardened. Its claws were small and dull. It was shaking with fear, pressing itself against the back of the container, trying to become invisible. Lowered her pistol. The cub flinched at the movement. It made a small sound, something between a cry and a whimper. Had never heard a make such a sound. She did not know they could. She put her pistol back in her belt. She crouched down slowly, making herself smaller, less threatening. The cub watched her with those golden eyes, still shaking. "Hey," said softly, "it's okay, I'm not going to hurt you." The cub did not understand her words, but it seemed to understand her tone. The shaking slowed a little. Looked at the cub more carefully. There were marks on its neck, burn marks. Someone had used a shock collar on this creature. There were also scars on its legs, thin white lines where the soft scales had been cut. Anger rose in its chest. She had seen this before. Smugglers captured rare creatures and sold them to rich collectors. The creatures were beaten, starved, and shocked until they became obedient, until they forgot they were ever wild. Someone had done this to a child. Reached into her pocket and pulled out a protein bar. She unwrapped it slowly, letting the cub see what she was doing. Then she broke off a small piece and held it out. The cub stared at the food. It was hungry, could see its ribs through the soft scales, but it did not move. It did not trust her. Placed the piece of food on the floor and moved back. She waited. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the cub moved forward, slow and careful. It sniffed the food. It looked at. It sniffed again. Then it grabbed the food and ate it so fast that worried it would choke. She broke off another piece. This time, she held it in her hand and did not move back. The cub hesitated longer this time, but hunger won. It crept forward and took the food from her fingers. Its claws touched her palm, light and gentle. Smiled. Over the next hour, she fed the cub the entire protein bar. By the end, it was sitting close to her, no longer shaking. When she reached out slowly and touched its head, it did not run. It leaned into her hand. "What am I going to do with you?" whispered. She knew she should report this. Were protected by Galactic Treaty. No one was allowed to capture them, sell them, or keep them as pets. If authorities found out she had one on her ship, there would be questions. Investigations, trouble. But if she reported it, what would happen to the cub? It would be taken to some research facility, studied, examined, kept in a cage for the rest of its life. It would never see its home. It would never be free. Made a decision. She picked up the cub gently. It was surprisingly light, all bones and soft scales. It made a small sound of surprise but did not struggle. It seemed to understand that she was not a threat. Carried it out of the cargo bay and into the main corridor of the ship. She walked past the engine room where was working on the power systems. He looked up and saw what she was carrying. His eyes went wide. "Captain, is that O?" "Don't ask questions," said, "just trust me." Stared at the cub. The cub stared back at him with those golden eyes. Then it made a soft chirping sound, almost friendly. His face softened. "It's cute." "It's dangerous," said, "or it will be when it grows up. But right now it's just scared and hungry and alone." She kept walking. She passed the medical bay where Lee was organizing supplies, saw the cub and dropped a box of bandages. "Captain, what is that?" A passenger said, "I'll explain later." She reached the bridge where sat at the navigation console. He was a big man with a rough face and a permanent frown. He had been a soldier before he became a navigator. He did not like surprises. He turned around and saw the cub in his arms. His frown deepened. "Absolutely not," he said. "It's staying," said. "That thing will grow up and eat us all. Then we'll teach it not to." Opened his mouth to argue, but the cub looked at him with those big golden eyes. It made another small chirping sound. It reached out one tiny clawed hand toward him. Closed his mouth. He looked away. "Keep it out of my navigation room." Smiled. That was as close to agreement as ever got. She took the cub to her quarters. She made a nest of blankets in the corner. She placed the cub inside and watched it curl up, exhausted and finally safe. "You need a name," said softly. She thought about it for a moment. Then she remembered a word her grandmother used to say, a word from the old language of her ancestors. She said, "It means the world." The cub opened one eye and looked at her. Then it closed the eye and went asleep. Sat on the edge of her bed and watched the little creature breathe. She did not know what she was doing. She did not know what would happen. She only knew that she could not leave this child alone. Outside the ship, the stars turned slowly in the endless darkness. The Promise flew on through the outer rim, carrying its strange new passenger toward an unknown future. And in the shadows of distant ports, someone was already asking questions. Someone was already looking for lost cargo. Someone would soon learn that a human freighter captain had found something that did not belong to her. But that was a problem for another day. For now, sat in the quiet of her room and listened to sleep. For now, that was enough. 3 months passed on the Promise. The ship continued its work, carrying cargo from station to station, colony to colony, but everything else had changed. Was growing. When first found her, the cub was small enough to hold in one arm. Now she reached waist. Her scales had changed from soft green to deep emerald, and they were beginning to harden at the edges. Her claws were longer and sharper. Her teeth were no longer dull. But her eyes were the same, golden and bright, filled with curiosity and trust. The crew had accepted her completely, had built a heated sleeping area in the engine room where the warmth from the power systems kept comfortable. He said it was just engineering, just solving a problem, but often found him talking to in soft voices, explaining how the engines worked, letting her watch him repair circuits and replace parts. Had downloaded every medical file she could find about biology. Most of it was military research, focused on how to fight them and how to kill them. But hidden in the data were notes about their bodies, their growth patterns, their dietary needs. Learned that cubs needed protein and calcium in large amounts. She adjusted the ship's food supplies accordingly. Even had softened, though he would never admit it. had watched him during long night shifts when he thought no one was looking, would pad onto the bridge and curl up near his feet, would pretend to ignore her, but his hand would reach down and scratch behind her ears and would make that soft chirping sound that meant she was happy. They had become a family. But families could be torn apart. The Crimson Fang was the largest pirate syndicate in the Outer Rim. They had dozens of ships, hundreds of fighters, and a network of informants that stretched across every station and colony. Their leader was a creature called. Was not human. He was not any species that had a proper name. He was 7 feet of muscle and scales and teeth, with eyes like black holes and a voice that sounded like breaking bones. No one knew where he came from. No one knew how old he was. They only knew that he was smart, cruel, and patient. He had built his empire on a simple idea. Everything had a price. Ships, cargo, people, secrets. Everything could be bought and sold. Everyone could be owned. When his informants told him about the human freighter with the cub, smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. A life was worth more than most starships. A young one, still trainable, still moldable, was worth even more. Collectors across the galaxy would pay fortunes for such a creature. Some wanted them as exotic pets. Others wanted to study them. A few wanted to use them as weapons. Did not care what they wanted. He only cared about the credits. He sent his second-in-command to handle the retrieval. Was a humanoid with gray skin and a face covered in scars. He had served for 20 years. He had done terrible things in those years. He was very good at his job. Took 3 ships and 20 fighters. It was more than enough for one old freighter. The Promise needed supplies. The water recyclers were failing again and needed parts that could only be found at a proper station. Set course for station, a trading hub on the edge of civilized space. Station was not a nice place. It was built into an asteroid, a maze of tunnels and corridors filled with traders, smugglers, and people who did not want to be found. The authorities looked the other way as long as everyone paid their fees. It was exactly the kind of place where someone might look for stolen cargo. Knew the risks, but she had no choice. Without the parts, the water recyclers would fail completely within 2 weeks. The crew would die of thirst before they reached another station. She docked the ship in Bay 17 and gathered her crew in the common room. "We need parts, food, and information," she said. "Take the parts list to the mechanical district. Restock our medical supplies. Stay with the ship and keep the engines warm in case we need to leave fast." "What about you, Captain?" asked. "I'm going to talk to some old friends, see if anyone's been asking questions about us. Look towards quarters where we're sleeping, and she stays on the ship, hidden. No one can know she's here." The crew nodded. They understood the danger. Went to her quarters and knelt beside Nest. The cub was awake now, her golden eyes watching with that familiar mix of love and curiosity. "I have to go out for a while," said softly. She pressed her forehead against the snout, feeling the warm breath on her skin. "Stay here. Stay hidden. I'll bring you something from the market." Made a low sound, almost like a question. "I'll be back soon," promised. "I'll always come back." She left the ship and entered the station. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of cooked meat. Voices echoed in a dozen languages. Creatures of every shape and size moved through the corridors, buying and selling, arguing and fighting. Moved through the crowd with practiced ease. She had visited station many times before. She knew its secrets, its shortcuts, its dangers. She did not notice the figures following her. They kept their distance, moving through shadows, blending with the crowd. They wore dark clothes and carried hidden weapons. They watched enter a bar, speak with a fat man behind the counter, exchange credits for information. They watched her leave and walk toward the food district. They did not approach her. They did not need to. Their job was to watch and report. Someone else would handle the rest. 3 docks away from the Promise, a ship with a blood-red hull was powering down its engines. Its name was written in a language that meant pain bringer in the old tongue. Stood in the airlock looking at the station through cold eyes. He had done this many times before. Find the target, eliminate resistance, retrieve the cargo, simple work. He turned to his fighters. The human captain is in the market. She'll be busy for at least an hour. We go in fast, grab the cub, and get out before she returns. Anyone who resists dies. The fighters nodded. They were professionals. Smiled, which made his face look even more terrible. Let's go get our prize. They moved through the station like ghosts, avoiding crowds, staying in shadows. They reached Bay 17 in 10 minutes. The Promise sat quietly in its dock, its engines humming with idle power. Studied the ship, old but well-maintained, a good freighter for honest work. Its crew probably thought they were safe here in a public station, surrounded by witnesses. They were wrong. Signaled his team. 2 would stay outside to watch for the captain. The rest would enter the ship, neutralize any crew members, and secure the cub. They moved toward the airlock. Inside, the ship stirred in her sleep. She did not know what was coming. But she would learn soon enough. And when she screamed, the sound would echo through every corridor of the Promise, calling to the one person who had promised to protect her. The person who was still walking through the market, buying food, thinking about what to bring home for her daughter. The person who did not know that her world was about to burn. Heard the scream from 3 corridors away. He was in the engine room, checking the power flow to the water recyclers. The station mechanics had sold him good parts, and he was eager to install them. The work was delicate and required focus. The scream shattered his focus completely. It was not a human scream. It was higher, sharper, filled with a terror that cut through metal walls like a blade. Knew that voice. He had heard it chirp with happiness, growl with playful anger, and purr with contentment. He had never heard it scream with fear. He dropped his tools and ran. The corridor stretched before him like a nightmare. The walls seemed to close in. His legs felt slow and heavy. Every second lasted an hour. He could hear other sounds now. Voices. Harsh, commanding voices that did not belong to his crew. He reached the captain's quarters and stopped. The door was open. Inside, chaos had taken over. Belongings were scattered across the floor. The nest of blankets where slept was torn apart, and in the center of the room stood a creature from a horror story. The creature was humanoid but not human. Its skin was gray, stretched tight over hard muscle. Its face was covered in scars, each one a record of violence survived. Its eyes were empty of everything except cold purpose. It was holding by the throat. The cub's claws scratched uselessly against the creature's armored forearm. Her legs kicked at the air. Her golden eyes were wide with terror, searching the room for help that was not there. Behind the creature stood 2 more figures. They held weapons pointed at and who knelt on the floor with their hands behind their heads. His face was bleeding from a cut above his eye, was pale and shaking, but her jaw was set with stubborn anger. Stepped into the doorway. His heart was pounding. His hands were empty. He was an engineer, not a fighter. He fixed things. He built things. He had never hurt anyone in his life, but was choking in that creature's grip. "Put her down," he said. His voice came out stronger than he expected. The creature turned its face toward him. Its lips pulled back in something like a smile. "Another one," it said. Its voice sounded like metal scraping against stone. "Get on your knees with the others." Did not move. I said put her down. The creature's smile widened. It tightened its grip on his throat. The cub made a strangled sound. Her struggling weakened. "The cub comes with us," the creature said. "We were hired to retrieve it. Your captain should have known better than to steal from the wrong people." "She didn't steal," anyone said. "Was being smuggled, trafficked, saved her." "Saved?" the creature laughed. It was an ugly sound. "Is that what you call it? Your captain found valuable cargo and kept it for herself. That's theft. and theft has consequences. One of the fighters grabbed from behind and forced him to his knees. The cold barrel of a weapon pressed against the back of his head. "Now," the creature said, "we're going to walk out of here. If anyone follows, the cub dies first. Then the rest of you, do you understand?" No one answered. The creature began walking toward the door. Hung from its grip like a broken toy, her eyes found. They were filled with questions. Where was the captain? Why wasn't anyone stopping this? Why was this happening? Had no answers. The corridor was quiet as the creature dragged toward the airlock. Its fighters kept their weapons aimed at the crew. Everything was going exactly as planned. Then the airlock opened. Park stood in the doorway. She wore her usual clothes, a worn jacket, cargo pants, boots that had walked 1,000 miles. She carried a crate of supplies on one shoulder, balanced with practiced ease. Her face showed no expression. She looked at the scene before her. The fighters, the weapons, her crew on their knees. And struggling in the grip of a monster, crying out in a sound that was not quite a word but meant everything. "Set the crate down." She did not reach for her pistol. She did not call for help. She simply looked at the creature holding her daughter and spoke in a voice as calm as deep space. "Let go of my daughter." The creature stared at her. For a moment something flickered in its empty eyes. Not fear, not exactly, more like confusion. This human woman was alone and unarmed. She should be screaming, crying, begging for mercy. Instead, she was giving orders. "Captain Park," the creature said, "I am second in command of the Crimson Fang. This cub is now property of. If you interfere, you and your crew will die." Did not react to the threat. Her eyes stayed on. "It's okay, little one," she said softly. "I'm here now." Made a small sound. Her struggling slowed. Even in terror, she recognized that voice. Grip tightened. "One more step, human, and I will crush her throat." Took a step. Then another. She walked toward with the steady pace of someone who had all the time in the world. The fighters raised their weapons. Shouts filled the corridor. Threats. Warnings. Ignored them all. Her eyes never left his face. Her expression never changed. She walked past her kneeling crew, past the aimed weapons, past every rule of survival she had learned in 15 years of flying through dangerous space. She stopped in front of. "This is your last chance," said. His voice had lost some of its confidence. "Back away or I will." Moved. It was not fast in the way that hollows showed combat. There was no spinning, no jumping, no dramatic poses. Her hand simply reached out and wrapped around his wrist, the one holding his throat. Her fingers found the gap between his armor plates. She still did not look at him. Her eyes stayed on her daughter. "Don't be scared," she whispered. "I've got you." Then she squeezed. The sound was something no one in that corridor would ever forget. It was wet and sharp, like stepping on a bag full of small sticks. It was the sound of every bone in a hand being crushed at once, ground together until they were nothing but fragments floating in torn flesh. Screamed. It was not a warrior's cry or a shout of rage. It was a pure animal sound, ripped from somewhere deep inside him. 20 years of violence and cruelty, 20 years of making others scream, and now he finally knew what it felt like. His grip released, fell. Caught her with one arm, pulling her close, holding her safe. Her other hand still gripped destroyed wrist. The fighters stared. Their weapons were still raised, but their hands were shaking. They had seen their leader hurt before. They had never seen him broken. Looked at the captain he had served for years. He had always known she was strong. He had always known she was brave. But this was something else. This was something he had no name for. Finally looked at. Her face was still calm, still expressionless. "Tell," she said, "that the cub is not for sale. Tell him that if he sends anyone else, I will do worse. Tell him that if he comes himself, I will make sure he never leaves this sector alive." She released his wrist. collapsed against the wall, cradling his ruined hand. His face was gray with shock. Blood leaked through his armored glove. His legs could barely hold him. "Now get off my ship," said. The fighters looked at each other. They looked at the human woman holding a cub like it was the most precious thing in the universe. They ran. They grabbed and dragged him toward the airlock. They did not look back. They did not make threats. They simply fled as fast as their legs could carry them. The airlock closed behind them. Silence filled the corridor. Sank to her knees, still holding. The cub was shaking, pressing herself against his chest, making small sounds of fear and relief. "I'm sorry," whispered. "I'm so sorry. I should have been here. I should have protected you." Looked up at her with those golden eyes. She reached out one clawed hand and touched his face. "Safe," she said. Her voice was rough, her words clumsy, but they were words, real words. His eyes filled with tears. "Yes," she said. "You're safe now, I promise you're safe." Around them the crew slowly stood, rubbed his neck where the weapon had pressed, checked his bleeding forehead. Everyone was quiet, processing what they had just witnessed. Their captain had walked into a room full of armed pirates and walked out holding her daughter. And she had not even looked at the man whose hand she destroyed. They did not know what to say, so they said nothing. Outside the ship, somewhere in the maze of station, was being carried toward the blood-red ship. He was still screaming. He would scream for a very long time. And somewhere in the darkness between stars was about to receive a message that would change everything. The medical bay on its flagship was the best in the Outer Rim. It had equipment stolen from military hospitals, drugs taken from research facilities, and doctors who had been kidnapped from their homes and forced to serve. None of it could fix hand. The chief surgeon stood before, trembling. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes. She had served the Crimson Fang for 7 years. In that time, she had seen terrible things, but she had never been more afraid than she was right now. Sat in his command chair like a king on a throne. His black eyes stared at the surgeon without blinking. His massive hands rested on the arms of the chair. He had not spoken in 5 minutes. The silence was worse than any threat. "The damage is complete," the surgeon said. Her voice shook. "Every bone in the hand is shattered, not broken, shattered. The fragments have torn through muscle, nerve, and blood vessel. We can reconstruct some function, but it will take 17 hours of surgery and 18 months of recovery. He will never have full use of the hand again." Still did not speak. The surgeon swallowed. "We have never seen damage like this caused by bare hands. The force required would be extraordinary, beyond normal human capability." "Normal," said finally. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. "You think this human is normal?" "I do not know, sir." The surgeon stepped back without meaning to. He was over 7 feet tall, a mountain of muscle and scales. When he moved, the whole room seemed to shrink. He walked to the medical bay viewing window. Beyond the glass lay on a surgical table, unconscious, his arm covered in tubes and monitors. He had stopped screaming 2 hours ago when the drugs finally overcame the pain. "Tell me exactly what happened," said. The surgeon checked her. According to the fighters who witnessed the incident, the human captain walked toward unarmed. She did not run or attack. She simply walked. When she reached him, she grabbed his wrist and crushed it. The entire action took less than 3 seconds. And the fighters, why did they not stop her? "They were unable to react in time, sir. They report that the captain did not look at during the attack. She was looking at the cub. They say she did not even seem angry, just calm. Turned from the window, calm." "Yes, sir." For a long moment said nothing. Then he laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. It was the laugh of a predator who had found something interesting. "Send the medical report to every information broker in the sector," he said. "Include the surgical reconstruction log. The bone fragment counts. The prognosis. The surgeon blinked. Sir, you want to make this public. I want everyone to know what happened. I want every pirate, every smuggler, every criminal in the Outer Rim to know that a human woman destroyed my second-in-command without looking at him. But, sir, that will make us look weak. Others might think they can challenge us. Smiled. His teeth were sharp and yellow. No. Others will think about what happens when you threaten something a human loves. They will think about that woman walking through armed fighters like they were not there. They will think about one of the most feared warriors in 3 sectors, screaming in a medical bay because a freighter captain squeezed his hand. He walked toward the door. Humans are strange creatures, doctor. They are small. They are soft. They do not have claws or scales or venom. By all measures, they should be prey, not predators. He stopped at the door and looked back. But when you threaten their young, something changes. Something old wakes up inside them. Something that does not care about odds or weapons or consequences. Something that will walk through fire to reach you. His black eyes were thoughtful. We made a mistake. We treated that cub like cargo. We forgot that the human had claimed it as family, and humans do not surrender family. They destroy anything that threatens it. So what do we do, sir? Open the door. We learn from our mistake, we remember the lesson, and we stay far away from Captain Park and her daughter. He left the medical bay. Behind him, the surgeon stood alone, trying to understand what she had just heard. The most powerful pirate lord in the Outer Rim was retreating from a single human woman. The galaxy was stranger than she had ever imagined. On the Promise, the crew was trying to return to normal. It was not easy. Had installed the new parts in the water recyclers. The work kept his hands busy and his mind quiet. But every few minutes he would stop and stare at nothing, remembering the sound of bones breaking. Had treated everyone's minor injuries. Scott needed 7 stitches, had bruises on his neck. Even the captain had scrapes on her knuckles from where she had gripped armor. They did not talk about what happened. There were no words that felt right. Sat at his navigation console, plotting a course away from station. His hands moved automatically, entering coordinates, checking fuel levels, calculating jump distances. But his mind was elsewhere. He had been a soldier once. He had fought in wars, killed enemies, watched friends die. He thought he understood violence. He thought he knew what humans were capable of. He was wrong. The way the captain had moved, the way she had looked at while destroying a man's hand, the complete absence of doubt or hesitation or fear. It was not normal, and yet somehow it felt right. He remembered his grandmother's stories about the old times, before humans left Earth. She talked about mothers who lifted burning cars to save their children, about fathers who fought wild animals with bare hands, about ordinary people who became extraordinary when their families were threatened. She called it the gift, the ability to ignore every limit, every fear, every rule of the body when love demanded it. Had never believed those stories. Now he understood that they were true. In the captain's quarters, sat on her bed with curled against her side. The cub had not let go of her since the attack. Even in sleep, her claws gripped his jacket, holding on like she was afraid to wake up alone. Stroked scales gently. They were harder now, closer to the black obsidian of adult. In a few years would be taller than her, stronger, faster, a true apex predator. But right now, she was just a child who had been very scared. "I'm sorry," whispered for the 100th time. "I should have been here. I should have protected you." Stirred, her golden eyes opened slowly. She looked up with an expression that seemed too old for her young face. "You came," she said. Her words were still clumsy, but they were clear. "You came back." "I promised I would." Was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question that had been dreading. "Why I am not your kind? Why do you protect me?" Thought about all the answers she could give. Because it was right. Because deserved better. Because the galaxy was cruel and someone had to push back. But those were not the true answer. "Because you are my daughter," she said simply. "I chose you and you chose me. That makes us family, and family protects each other. Always." Considered this. Her claws relaxed their grip on his jacket, her eyes softened. "The bad one," she said. "The gray one who held me, you hurt him." "Yes." "You broke his hand." "Yes." Looked at its hands. They were small compared to her own clawed fingers, soft and pink without scales or armor. "How?" she asked. "You are small, soft, he was big and strong." Smiled sadly. "Humans are strange, little one. We are weak in many ways, but when someone threatens our family, we become something else. Something that does not care about strength or size or armor. Something that will do whatever it takes to keep our loved ones safe." Thought about this for a long time. "I understand," she said finally. "Are the same. When hunters threaten our cubs, the mothers become like fire. They do not think, they do not fear, they only protect." She pressed her snout against the cheek. "You are a good mother," she said, "even though you are small and soft and have no claws." Laughed. It was the first time she had laughed since returning to the ship. The sound surprised her. "Thank you, little one, I try." They sat together in the quiet room, mother and daughter, human and predator, bound by something stronger than blood. Outside the ship, the stars waited. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, full of pirates and monsters and those who saw others as nothing but cargo. But the Promise was leaving station, carrying its strange family toward new adventures. And somewhere in the darkness, a story was beginning to spread. A story about a human woman who walked through armed fighters without fear. A story about a hand crushed without a glance. A story about the terrible thing that wakes inside humans when you threaten their children. It was a story that would change everything. The message arrived at midnight station time. In 1,000 bars on 100 stations across dozens of colonies, information brokers opened the same file. They read it once. They read it twice. Then they forwarded it to everyone they knew. By morning, the story had spread to every corner of the outer rim. The file contained a medical report, 17 hours of surgery, bone fragment counts in the hundreds, detailed scans showing a hand that had been reduced to gravel inside a glove. The prognosis was grim. Partial function might return in 18 months. Full recovery was impossible. Attached to the report was a single line of text. The human did this without looking. Pirates gathered in dark corners to discuss what it meant. Smugglers whispered the story over drinks. Bounty hunters updated their lists of targets to avoid. Everyone had questions. Everyone had theories. But everyone agreed on one thing. Captain Park of the Promise was not someone to cross. The story grew with each telling. Some said she had torn his arm off completely. Others claimed she had killed 3 fighters before anyone could move. A few insisted that she was not human at all, but some kind of engineered soldier escaped from a military program. The truth was simpler and more frightening. She was just a freighter captain who loved her daughter. On a mining station in the Kelvin Belt, a young pirate named listened to his captain tell the story for the 3rd time. "The point," the captain said, "is that humans are unpredictable. They don't follow the rules. They don't calculate odds. When you back them into a corner, they don't surrender. They attack." Nodded, but he did not really understand. He had never threatened a human's family. He had never seen what happened when the quiet part of their brain went silent and something older took control. He would learn soon enough. 3 weeks later, ship encountered the Promise in open space. The freighter was alone, far from any station, easy prey. Captain gave the order to intercept. They got within visual range before they saw it. A small figure sitting in the freighter's observation window, green scales, golden eyes, a cub watching their approach with calm curiosity. The captain's face went pale. "Turn around," he said. "Sir?" asked. It's just one freighter. We outnumber them 10 to 1. I said turn around now. They turned around. Asked about it later when they were safely far away. The captain looked at him with tired eyes. That cub is the one from the story, he said. And if the cub is there, the mother is there. I've lost friends to human mothers, boy. They don't stop. They don't negotiate. They just keep coming until you're dead or they are. He took a long drink from his bottle. There's no profit worth that risk. No cargo valuable enough. Some fights you can't win no matter how many guns you have. Remembered those words for the rest of his life. On the promise, life had found a new normal. Was growing faster now. She reached shoulder and showed no signs of slowing. Her scales had turned fully black, hard as armor, beautiful in their darkness. Her claws could cut through metal. Her teeth could crush bone. But she still chirped happily when let her help in the engine room. She still purred when brushed her scales after meals. She still fell asleep at his feet during long night shifts. And she still climbed into his bed every night, curling around her mother like a protective shell. The crew noticed changes in other ships' behavior. Pirates that would have attacked them before now kept their distance. Stations that used to charge premium prices gave them fair deals. People who would have ignored them treated them with careful respect. "It's the story," said one evening as they shared dinner in the common room. "Everyone knows about what happened at station. They're afraid." "Afraid of the captain?" asked. "Afraid of what she represents. Humans protecting their families. The thing they can't predict or control." Nodded slowly. "My grandmother used to say that humans were the most dangerous animals on Earth. Not because we were strongest or fastest, but because we loved harder than anything else alive." Said nothing. She was watching eat, making sure she chewed her food properly. The cub had grown so much, but she still bolted her meals like she was afraid they might disappear. Some fears never fully healed. 6 months passed. The Promise continued its work, carrying cargo through the empty spaces between stars. The crew stayed together. The family grew stronger. Learned more words. She could speak in full sentences now, though her accent was strange and her grammar was creative. She asked endless questions about everything. How did the engines work? Why were stars different colors? What was Earth like? Why did humans cry when they were happy? Answered every question as best she could. Some answers led to more questions. Some answers led to long conversations that lasted until both of them fell asleep in the middle of a sentence. It was, thought, exactly what being a mother was supposed to be. One night, as the ship drifted through a quiet region of space, asked a question that had been expecting for months. "Mother," she said, using the word she had learned 3 weeks ago and had not stopped using since. "What happened to my first family, the ones before you?" Set down the book she was reading. This was a conversation that required full attention. "I don't know exactly," she said honestly. "When I found you, you were alone. Smugglers had taken you. They wanted to sell you to collectors." His golden eyes darkened. "Why?" "Because you are rare. Because you are beautiful. Because some people see living creatures as things to own." "Like cargo." "Yes, like cargo." Was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, "Do you think my first mother looked for me?" His heart ached. "I think she probably did. I think she probably searched until she couldn't search anymore. Mothers are fierce like human mothers. They don't give up on their children." "But she never found me." "No, she never found you." Looked at her claws. They were long now, sharp enough to cut steel. "I dream about her sometimes," she said softly. "I don't remember her face, but I remember her warmth, the sound of her voice." "That's good," said. "It's good to remember where you came from." "But you are my mother now." "Yes, I am your mother now." Moved closer, pressing against his side. "I have two mothers, one who gave me life, one who saved it." Wrapped her arm around scaled shoulders. "That's a beautiful way to think about it." Will you ever stop being my mother? The question was small and afraid, like the cub had found hiding in a cargo container 3 years ago. Never, said firmly. Not ever. No matter how big you grow, no matter where you go, no matter what happens, I will always be your mother and you will always be my daughter. Made a sound that might have been a purr. Good, she said, because I have decided that I will protect you too. When I am big enough, I will make sure no one ever hurts you. We will protect each other. Smiled, I think that sounds perfect. They sat together in the quiet of the captain's quarters, watching the stars drift past the window. Human and mother and daughter, bound by something that had no name but needed no name. Outside, the galaxy continued its endless dance. Pirates whispered warnings about the human woman who broke hands without looking. Smugglers avoided any ship that might be carrying a cub. Information brokers added new entries to their files about Captain Park and her terrifying reputation. None of it mattered to the two figures curled together in the warm room. What mattered was the heartbeat, the breathing, the simple presence of family. What mattered was the promise that had made 3 years ago and would keep until her last breath, that this child would be safe, would be loved, would never again know the terror of being alone. What mattered was the future stretching ahead of them, full of questions and answers, adventures and quiet moments, challenges and triumphs. The promise flew on through the darkness, carrying its precious cargo toward tomorrow. And in the vastness of space, a simple truth echoed through every warning and whisper and story. If you see a human with a child that is not their species, do not interfere, do not threaten, do not test. Because humans do not love in small ways. And when you threaten their children, they will break you without even looking. That is not a threat. That is simply what they are.